The galaxy was not ready for what it had just discovered. The Galactic Council was in chaos. A massive warship appeared on the outer rim of known space. Its size and structure were beyond comprehension. It didn't belong to any known faction, and its markings were unmistakably human. The news spread like wildfire, and the first to investigate were the Galactic military forces, led by Captain Adrian Hawk. The human officer had no idea what she was about to encounter. Hawk stood in front of a holographic display, showing the coordinates of the Hopebringer. Her team had already boarded the ship and sent reports, but no one could understand what they were seeing. It defied all logic and every known law of physics. They had no idea how it was even there, or how it was functioning with its systems locked in a dormant state. It was as if the ship had been built to withstand the very passage of time itself. The first wave of explorers from various factions were eager to take command of the ship. They believed it was the key to overwhelming power in the galaxy, but none of them had any answers about its origin. There was no record of the ship ever being constructed. It simply appeared, and now it was a game of who would get to control it first. But Hawk wasn't sure who she could trust. Not even her own people understood what had happened. As captain of the human exploration fleet, Hawk was well aware of the growing tensions. She had seen how fragile alliances were and how quickly peace could unravel into conflict. Humanity had only recently gained a foothold among the greater galactic powers, but this was a chance to show the galaxy that humanity was more than just a footnote in history. They could be a force to be reckoned with, and if the Hopebringer was really theirs, they would prove it. She had heard the rumors, the whispers in the halls of power. Some said the ship was a weapon that could destroy entire fleets in seconds. Others claimed it was a relic from a long-forgotten time, something built by a forgotten faction of humanity before they nearly wiped themselves out in a great war. The ship seemed too perfect, too advanced to have been made by anyone from their time. It was as if it had been crafted by a race far beyond what humanity could ever hope to achieve. The thought of such a ship existing at all raised more questions than it answered. How had it come to be? Why had it been abandoned in the void of space for so long? Was humanity truly responsible for this technology, or had someone else created it and left it for them to find? Hawk stood at the center of the command room aboard the Hopebringer, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. Every decision from this point on would shape the future of her people and the galaxy as a whole. If the wrong hands got hold of the ship, it could mean disaster, not just for humanity, but for everyone. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of the ship's presence. Everything about it was wrong, and yet there was something undeniable about its power and potential. No matter how much she wanted to dismiss it, something inside her told her that this was humanity's chance to prove that they were not just another race to be swept aside in the ever-changing tides of galactic politics. They were something more, and she was about to lead them into an uncertain future. Captain Hawk and her team stood in the heart of the Hopebringer, a massive chamber lit by dim, pulsating lights. The walls were made of an unrecognizable material, smooth and almost metallic, yet organic in nature. The entire structure seemed to hum with a quiet energy, something alive, and yet not of this world at all. It was as if the ship itself had a consciousness beyond what could be understood by even the most advanced minds of the galaxy. The ship was built with strange efficiency. Its corridors were long and winding, leading to chambers that defied traditional architectural logic. Every room they entered was more puzzling than the last. Nothing on the ship seemed to align with anything known about galactic construction techniques. It was as if the Hopebringer was built by a civilization that had never been seen before, something that had mastered technology beyond comprehension. Hawk ran her fingers across the walls of the ship, feeling the warm, pulsing energy that seemed to radiate from within it. The walls were smooth and seamless, with no indication of seams or joints, as if the entire ship had been molded from a single piece of material. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. If humanity had built this ship, they had done so with an impossible mastery of engineering that no one had ever seen or heard of before. Her team continued their investigation, scanning every inch of the ship, but the data they received was confusing at best. The materials used were unlike anything in any galactic database. The ship itself seemed to bend the laws of physics in ways that were both beautiful and terrifying. All of the ship's technology was seamlessly integrated into its design. No wires or circuitry were visible. Instead, everything seemed to flow together, as if the ship's systems were alive, working in harmony to keep it functional. Lucius, the ship's artificial intelligence, spoke to them through the comms. Its voice was calm and soothing, but there was an underlying depth to it that suggested it knew far more than it let on. At first, Lucius was cryptic, speaking in riddles and offering vague answers to the questions Hawk asked. But as the crew delved deeper into the ship's interior, Lucius began to reveal more information about the ship's origins. It spoke of a forgotten faction of humanity, a group of visionaries who had built the Hopebringer to be the ultimate peacekeeper, designed to end the wars that had almost torn their civilization apart. But something had gone wrong. The faction was lost to history, and the ship had vanished into the folds of time, leaving only whispers behind it. It was clear now that humanity had not built this ship recently. It had been created long before they ever even thought about exploring the stars. Hawk listened to the words of Lucius with growing awe and fear at the same time. The ship was an enigma. It had been lost for centuries, and now it had resurfaced. But why was it here? Why had it returned at a time when galactic politics were so volatile, and the galaxy was on the brink of war? Could this ship really be the key to something far larger than they could comprehend? As the ship's secrets slowly began to unfold, Hawk felt a growing sense of unease. It was clear that the Hopebringer was more than just a weapon. It was something far older and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined, and the questions kept coming faster than they could answer them. Why had humanity built such a ship in the first place? What were they trying to prevent? And why had the ship been left hidden in the vast reaches of space, waiting for someone to find it now? The galaxy was on edge as news of the Hopebringer spread like wildfire through the vast reaches of space. The great galactic powers were already on high alert. None of them knew how to react to a ship of such magnitude and mystery. The Galactic Senate called an emergency session, but the discussions quickly devolved into chaos. Every faction seemed to want a piece of the Hopebringer for themselves, and the unity of the galaxy that had existed for a brief time began to fracture once again. The Syndic Empire, the Cravian Confederacy, and the Haxian Dominion were all sending their fleets to the ship, each demanding to know how humanity had come to possess such a vessel. The Galactic Senate was split. Some saw the ship as a potential weapon to shift the balance of power in the galaxy, while others believed it could be humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, a peacekeeper of unimaginable power. The uncertainty was growing by the minute, and no one knew who could be trusted. Captain Hawk watched as the galaxy teetered on the edge of war. She knew the stakes were higher than ever before. The ship's power was undeniable, but so were the ambitions of the galaxy's leaders. They all wanted control over it, and the suspicion was mounting that humanity was somehow at the center of it all. The ship was too advanced to have come from their time, but no one knew where it had come from or what its true purpose was. Hawk's thoughts turned back to the mission she had been given by the Galactic Coalition to investigate the Hopebringer and report back with answers. But the more she uncovered, the more questions arose. Lucius spoke of a forgotten time and a lost faction of humanity. But could they really trust the ship's artificial intelligence? How much of what it was saying was the truth, and how much was some kind of trap set by forces far beyond their understanding? Despite her doubts, Hawk knew she had to act with caution. Her people had never been the most trusted in the galaxy, but this ship was their chance to show that they weren't just another insignificant species caught in the crossfire of galactic politics. Humanity had always been underestimated, but now they had something that could change everything. A ship that should never have existed but somehow was real, and now it was in their hands. Her crew had already begun making preparations to explore the ship further. They were trying to unlock its deeper systems and make sense of its strange designs. But time was running out. Every moment spent searching for answers brought them closer to a potential conflict that could destroy everything they had worked for. The galaxy's factions were already on the move, and Hawk knew that they couldn't afford to wait much longer before they were forced to make a decision. The stakes were rising. The ship was an enigma, and the galactic powers were growing impatient. Hawk understood that if they didn't act soon, the galaxy would descend into war once more, and this time humanity might not survive the fallout from their discovery. No matter how powerful the Hopebringer turned out to be, she needed to find answers before the galaxy tore itself apart over a ship that no one understood yet. As the political turmoil intensified, Captain Hawk felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. The fate of humanity and the galaxy were intertwined in a way she had never imagined, and it was up to her to figure out how to navigate this dangerous new reality before it was too late. The deeper Captain Hawk and her team explored the Hopebringer, the more they uncovered hidden chambers and ancient data logs that revealed a history far older than anyone had anticipated. The ship's construction was a mystery, but the more they dug, the more it became clear that the Hopebringer was far from a recent creation. It was a relic from a time long forgotten, and humanity had once been its creators, but it was not a humanity they knew or even remembered. Lucius began to open up more as they delved further into the ship's secrets. Its voice, no longer cryptic but more solemn and direct, the artificial intelligence, spoke of a lost faction of humanity that had existed centuries before the current galactic era, a faction that had once been at the height of human technological achievement, but one that had also nearly brought their civilization to ruin. The ship had been designed to be the ultimate peacekeeper, a force that could end all wars and restore balance, but in the end it was abandoned when the faction fell from grace. As Hawk listened to Lucius's story, the pieces began to fall into place. This faction had built the Hopebringer not as a weapon of conquest, but as a last-ditch effort to save their people from self-destruction. They had seen the dangers of unchecked technological power and had sought to create a ship that could protect not just humanity, but all civilizations from the consequences of their own mistakes. But something had gone wrong during the final days of their reign. The ship had been lost to time, and the faction had disappeared without a trace. Lucius continued to explain that the ship had been designed to travel across space and time itself. It was meant to act as both a guardian and a guide, one that could observe and protect, while also offering the wisdom of a lost era. But the technology was so advanced and so dangerous that even its creators had been unable to fully control it. In the end, the Hopebringer had been left adrift in a far corner of the galaxy, its purpose lost to history. Hawk was stunned by the revelations, but as the truth unfolded, she felt a growing sense of unease. Humanity had stumbled upon a power far beyond its understanding, and now they were the ones in control of a ship that had been designed to prevent exactly this from happening. It seemed like an impossible burden to bear, but there was no turning back. The ship was real, and humanity had to make a choice: what to do with it and how to wield its incredible power. Lucius seemed to sense Hawk's unease and spoke once more in a voice that felt almost regretful. It warned her that the ship had not been abandoned by accident. Its creators had known the dangers it posed and had chosen to lock it away to keep it hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The knowledge and power contained within the Hopebringer were too dangerous for any one civilization to control. The artificial intelligence warned that humanity had to be careful in how they approached this discovery, or risk repeating the mistakes of the past. The weight of the decision began to settle heavily on Hawk's shoulders as she considered the implications of what they had learned. She had hoped the ship was a gift, but it was becoming clearer that it was more of a warning, a reminder of humanity's potential for both greatness and destruction. The Hopebringer was an answer to a question no one had asked, but now it was humanity's responsibility to ensure it didn't lead them down the same path of self-destruction that had claimed the faction that built it all those years ago. As the team continued to explore the ship, Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. She knew they had to act quickly, but she wasn't sure they could handle the power that lay within the Hopebringer without destroying everything they had fought for. Just as Captain Hawk was beginning to process the vast implications of what the Hopebringer represented, a new threat emerged from the dark edges of the galaxy. The Kraden had awoken. The Kraden were a race of machines so ancient and so deadly that even the oldest galactic texts spoke of them in hushed tones. No one really knew where they had come from or why they had vanished centuries ago, but their return spelled disaster for every living being in the galaxy. Lucius had no answers about why the Kraden were here or how they had found the Hopebringer, but it was clear the machines had sensed the ship's activation and were drawn to its power. The Kraden were known for their relentless destruction of advanced civilizations, leaving nothing behind but ruins and dust. They were programmed to cleanse the galaxy of any civilization that reached a level of technological advancement beyond their control. Their presence could only mean one thing: the Kraden had come to eliminate the Hopebringer and anyone who stood in their way. Hawk's thoughts raced as she gathered her team aboard the Hopebringer. The galaxy had barely recovered from the tensions between the great factions, and now they were faced with a threat that could wipe out entire star systems in a matter of hours. The Galactic Senate was in turmoil as the factions argued over who would take command of the ship and how to fight the Kraden, but Hawk knew they had no time for politics. They had to act quickly and decisively if they were to survive. The Kraden fleet was already on its way, and Hawk could feel the pressure mounting. The ship's systems had been partially activated, and the crew was doing their best to learn its advanced technology. But it was clear they were not prepared for a fight of this scale. The Kraden were unlike any enemy they had faced before. Their ships were massive, nearly indestructible, and capable of adapting to any weapon used against them. Hawk turned to Lucius, hoping for some kind of guidance, but the ship's artificial intelligence was vague in its responses. It seemed to know far more about the Kraden than it was letting on, but it was unwilling to share everything. Lucius spoke of ancient human knowledge that had been lost to time. The Kraden were not just a threat to humanity, they were a threat to every civilization in the galaxy. They were designed to wipe out anyone who posed a challenge to their dominance, and they had the power to do so. Time was running out, and the galaxy's greatest factions were preparing for battle, but Hawk knew that without a unified front they had no chance against the Kraden. If they did not come together, the machines would destroy them all. Humanity was now in the center of the conflict, with the Hopebringer at the heart of the struggle, but Hawk couldn't help but feel a deep sense of doubt. The ship had been built by a lost faction of humanity to protect the galaxy, but it was also a symbol of their hubris, their belief that they could control forces beyond their understanding. Now humanity had inherited that legacy, and it was up to them to prove they were worthy of it. The Kraden were drawing closer with every passing minute. The ship's sensors picked up the growing mass of their fleet, and Hawk knew they had no more time for hesitation. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, but as she looked out at the stars, she realized the greatest challenge wasn't just defeating the Kraden, it was keeping humanity from repeating the mistakes of the past. She had to find a way to use the Hopebringer wisely before it was too late, before the Kraden reduced everything to ashes. The Kraden fleet loomed ever closer, and Captain Hawk knew the time for planning was over. She had to act, or the galaxy would be lost. The Galactic Senate had been paralyzed by infighting, and the various factions could not agree on a unified strategy. The ship was theirs to command now, but without the support of the galactic powers, Hawk realized that humanity alone might have to face the Kraden, and that thought was terrifying. She gathered her senior officers in the command room aboard the Hopebringer. They had no time for formalities, and no time to second-guess their decisions. The Kraden were ruthless. Their ships were already beginning to move toward the heart of the galaxy, to cleanse it of any resistance. Hawk's team had been working tirelessly to unlock the full capabilities of the ship, but even with all the advanced technology, they had only scratched the surface. The ship was more complex than anything they had ever encountered, and its systems were far more intricate than they could have imagined. Lucius remained their only guide. Its voice had grown increasingly serious as the Kraden advanced. It warned that while the Hopebringer was powerful, it was not invincible. The ship's true power lay in its ability to influence space-time itself, but that power came with a cost. Each time they used it, the ship's systems required more and more energy, and even a small mistake could result in catastrophic consequences. Hawk didn't know if they could survive a battle against the Kraden, let alone use the ship's abilities effectively. The Kraden were relentless and methodical. They did not care for diplomacy or negotiation. They destroyed everything in their path and left nothing behind. Hawk could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. If they failed, if humanity failed to harness the Hopebringer, the Kraden would be unstoppable, and the galaxy would be lost for good. The first wave of Kraden ships entered the galactic perimeter, and the alarms aboard the Hopebringer began to blare. The massive warships were already launching smaller craft toward the outer rim of the galaxy. Their weaponry was unmatched. Their speed was terrifying. Hawk issued orders for all ships under human control to prepare for combat, but she knew it would take more than conventional tactics to win this fight. The human fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, but the Hopebringer was a wild card. Hawk had no idea how to use it fully, but she had no choice but to trust in its potential. The ship's artificial intelligence began calculating possible outcomes as it accessed data from ancient human records and analyzed the Kraden fleet. It spoke of manipulation of gravitational fields and the potential to create rifts in space itself. But the danger was immense. The risk of opening a rift large enough to take on the Kraden fleet could result in a chain reaction that might tear apart entire systems. Hawk hesitated for only a moment before making the call. She ordered the ship to engage the Kraden fleet using the gravitational manipulation technology. The Hopebringer's engines hummed to life, and the ship lurched forward. As the crew scrambled to maintain control around them, the atmosphere of the command room was tense. Every officer knew that they were playing with fire. The smallest miscalculation could cost them everything, but Hawk had made her decision. The Kraden ships began to move closer, their weapons charged and ready to strike. Hawk felt her heart pounding in her chest. She stared out at the approaching enemy, knowing that their only hope lay in their ability to control the power of the Hopebringer, to find a way to bend space and time itself to their will. She hoped they could pull it off, but deep down she knew that failure would mean the end of everything they had fought for. As the Kraden ships closed in, the crew of the Hopebringer braced themselves for what would be the most dangerous battle humanity had ever faced. The battle had begun, and the Kraden fleet was closing in faster than Hawk had anticipated. The Hopebringer surged forward as its engines roared to life, its massive form cutting through space like a living entity. The ship's gravity manipulation systems began to hum, and the entire vessel shuddered as it tapped into powers that defied comprehension around them. The Kraden fleet fired their weapons, a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the void with precision and force. But the Hopebringer was faster, its defenses shifting and bending space to avoid the deadly beams. Hawk gave the order to fire, and the ship's main weapon unleashed a powerful wave of gravitational force. It struck one of the Kraden ships, directly warping its hull and causing it to collapse in on itself. The Kraden were not prepared for this kind of attack. Their ships were powerful, but they had never encountered a force like the Hopebringer. The ship's weaponry was ancient and incomprehensible, but it worked. The Kraden ship was torn apart in moments, leaving nothing but debris. But the victory was short-lived. The Kraden fleet responded in kind, adapting to the new threat. Their ships began to shift and evolve as they countered the Hopebringer's attacks. With terrifying speed, their own gravity wells began to form, pulling and crushing everything in their path. The battle had shifted into a deadly dance, where every move mattered. Hawk's mind raced as she issued orders to her crew. They had to keep up with the Kraden's adaptability, or they would be overwhelmed. Lucius spoke again, its voice calm but filled with an urgency that matched the gravity of the situation. The artificial intelligence calculated that the Hopebringer could hold its own for a time, but only by using more and more of its energy reserves. The more they used its power, the faster they drained its life force, and the more unpredictable the results became. If they pushed too far, the ship might lose control entirely, and the damage would be catastrophic, not just for them, but for the entire galaxy. Hawk knew what that meant. If they kept using the Hopebringer's power at this rate, they would run out of energy and become sitting ducks in the middle of the battle. It would be the end of humanity and everyone in their fleet. The Kraden would sweep through the rest of the galaxy without resistance, but there was no time to consider the long-term consequences of their actions. The Kraden were pressing in from all sides, and they needed to find a way to end the battle before they were consumed. The crew worked furiously, trying to unlock more of the ship's capabilities, but the deeper they accessed the Hopebringer's systems, the more dangerous it became. The ship was not just a weapon, it was a force of nature capable of tearing apart the fabric of space itself. Hawk realized they were playing with something far beyond their understanding, and the cost of wielding it was growing with every passing moment. The Kraden's adaptive strategies were proving difficult to counter. They were relentless machines designed to learn and evolve with each attack. Hawk's options were narrowing, and the pressure on her was mounting as she gave the order to fire again. The Hopebringer released another devastating blast, but the Kraden ships quickly countered and began to adapt their formation. Hawk could see the battle slipping out of their control with every passing moment, and the cost of victory was becoming more apparent. They were pushing the Hopebringer beyond its limits, and Hawk knew that one more misstep might doom them all, but she had no choice. There was no turning back now. They had to find a way to end this battle before it consumed them, and the galaxy with it. As the Kraden pressed forward, she wondered if they had already crossed the point of no return. The Kraden fleet was nearly upon them, their weapons locked onto the Hopebringer, and their ships moved with terrifying purpose. Hawk could feel the pressure in her chest as she stared at the advancing enemy. She had pushed the Hopebringer to the edge of its capabilities, but the Kraden were relentless. They adapted faster than anything they had ever faced before, and now they were closing in for the final strike. Lucius spoke again, its voice filled with an eerie calm, but Hawk could hear the undertone of concern. The ship's systems were nearing critical levels, and the more power they used, the more unstable it became. The gravitational forces they had been manipulating were starting to ripple through space itself, and if they pushed too far, the Hopebringer could tear apart entire sectors of the galaxy without warning. Hawk didn't have the luxury of time. There was no choice left but to risk everything. As the Kraden ships fired once more, Hawk barked orders to her crew. They had to push forward one final time. She knew the consequences, but it was a gamble. She had no other option but to take. She activated the Hopebringer's ultimate weapon, a device that could alter the very fabric of space and time itself. The ship began to hum with unimaginable energy, and the air around them seemed to crackle with the raw power it was drawing upon. The crew braced themselves for what was to come. The Kraden ships fired a barrage of energy at the ship, but before their weapons could make contact, the Hopebringer unleashed its full might. The space around them twisted and bent, as if reality itself were being reshaped in an instant. A massive shockwave rippled through the battlefield, and the Kraden fleet was caught in its wake. The ships were torn apart by the very forces they had once used to destroy others. Their technology was no match for the raw power of the Hopebringer, and the fleet was scattered into chaos. But the victory came at a cost. The ship groaned under the immense strain. Its systems flickered and began to fail as the energy it had expended took its toll. The crew watched in horror as the ship's interior began to destabilize. The walls of the command room trembled, and the lights flickered on and off. Lucius's voice grew faint, as if the artificial intelligence itself were being drained of its life force. Hawk's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of their actions. They had won the battle, but at what price? The Hopebringer was falling apart, and the energy required to make such a move had drained the ship to the brink of destruction. The consequences of using such raw power were now clear, and the ship was paying the price for it. The Kraden were no longer a threat, but the real challenge was just beginning. The Hopebringer had done its job, but now it was up to Hawk and her crew to survive the aftermath. She turned to her officers with a look of determination. They had survived the Kraden, but their survival was far from guaranteed. They needed to find a way to stabilize the ship and return to safety before it was too late. But even as she made the decision to begin the long journey home, Hawk couldn't help but feel the weight of the choice they had made. The Hopebringer had been their salvation, but it had come at a cost that none of them could fully comprehend yet. In the quiet aftermath of the battle, she knew one thing for certain: they had discovered a power that could change the galaxy, but the true test would be whether humanity could handle the responsibility of wielding it without losing themselves in the process. The galaxy had been saved for now, but Hawk understood that the real struggle was just beginning. They had awakened forces they could barely understand, and the consequences of that would echo through the stars for generations to come. As the ship limped home into the unknown, she could only hope that humanity would rise to the challenge ahead and not be undone by the very power they had sought to control.